Progressives are very mobilized over the Supreme Court in a way that I haven't seen for a long time, Neera Tanden of the Liberal Center for American Progress told NewsPulse News on Tuesday evening. Tanden said the kabuki theater that has been the recent confirmation process, in which nominees are allowed to reveal little of their actual judicial philosophy, must end. And she called on two moderate Republican women, Senator Susan Collins of Maine and Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, to stand by their support for abortion rights, which some believe are under threat with an increasingly conservative Supreme Court. Activists and advocates have to hold their feet to the fire, Tanden said, wondering if the two would want to be responsible, however indirectly, for having overturned the Roe v. Wade decision, which legalized abortion. At the very least, the coming weeks will produce one of the fiercest Supreme Court fights in U.S. history. And if Democrats somehow succeed in sinking Kavanaugh or even delaying his confirmation vote until after November's midterm election, in which they could regain control of the Senate, stop Kavanaugh may become the most consequential act of anti-Trump resistance to date. The particulars of that fight remain unclear, but one way or another, Democrats will need 51 votes in the Senate. They will only muster those votes if they can keep their own caucus together, which will involve making sure that senators from states Trump won, in particular, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Joe Donnelly of Indiana, don't decide that Kavanaugh is a palatable nominee. To ensure that, Democrats and the liberal base will do everything they can to paint Kavanaugh as an extremist activist who would curb the rights of women and organized labor, while potentially protecting Trump from a possible indictment by special counsel Robert Mueller, who is investigating ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. They will then have to hope to persuade Murkowski and Collins to join them in opposing Kavanaugh. They can also try to wait until the November midterms, though Democrats' chances of regaining the Senate are not seen as especially good. Tuesday evening saw liberal groups beginning to organize their opposition to Kavanaugh. We can't stop a vote. If McConnell gets the number that he needs, if he gets 51 votes, he will have it and he will confirm a Trump pick, Angel Padilla, policy director at Indivisible, told NewsPulse News. So, the only thing that we can do in the short term is stop Republicans from getting 51 votes, so that's what we're focusing on. Minutes after the president's announcement, launched, a project by Demand Justice, a progressive organization founded earlier this year. The website highlights Kavanaugh's views on presidential indictment, the Affordable Care Act and Roe. The American Civil Liberties Union made a six-figure ad buy that ran Friday through Monday, and specifically called on Collins and Murkowski to ask the nominee to take a clear position on Roe. We see the path towards protecting Roe goes straight through Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, Faiz Shakir, National Policy Director for the ACLU, told NewsPulse News. I think they hold a lot of power and sway over this particular debate. Everything from whether this nominee is able to get through to how the nominee's confirmation process will proceed. Demand Justice spent $5 million on ads that ran in Maine and Alaska, and it plans to launch more in North Dakota, West Virginia, and Indiana, the home states of Democratic Senators Heitkamp, Manchin, and Donnelly. The trio voted to confirm Gorsuch last year. It will fall to Minority Leader Schumer to keep them in line, while buying activists precious time to make the case to Collins and Murkowski. Now is the time for hardball, and Senator Chuck Schumer is up at bat, Ezra Levin, co-executive director of Indivisible, said in a statement. As Senate Minority Leader, it's his job to keep the Democratic caucus together. Prior to Trump's announcement, Schumer repeatedly argued that whomever the president chose would be unacceptable to Democrats because he or she would gravely threaten two existing rights that poll well with a majority of Americans: the right to health care coverage for people with pre-existing conditions, as established in the Affordable Care Act, and the right of women to get abortions, as established in the Supreme Court's 1973 Roe v. Wade decision. As soon as Trump announced Kavanaugh, Schumer and other Senate Democrats pounced, insisting that the pick had confirmed their worst fears and only strengthened their resolve to extract real answers from him. Judge Kavanaugh's own writings make clear that he would rule against reproductive rights and freedoms, and that he would welcome challenges to the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act, Schumer said in a statement. "I will oppose Judge Kavanaugh's nomination with everything I have." To that end, Senate Democrats hope to pin down Kavanaugh on abortion and Obamacare during his confirmation hearings, then use whatever he reveals to pressure at least one of the Republicans to vote against him. Assuming that ailing Arizona Senator John McCain retains his seat yet remains in Arizona on extended medical leave, that would produce a 49-49 split, meaning that Republicans couldn't get the 51 votes they need for confirmation even if Vice President Mike Pence stepped in and voted yay. Immediately after Justice Kennedy announced his retirement, many top Democrats said the Senate should follow the standard set by McConnell in 2016, when he blocked what would prove Barack Obama's third and final Supreme Court pick, Merrick Garland, and deny a vote to Trump's next nominee until after the upcoming election. McConnell has dismissed their demand. But Democrats do have some tools at their disposal. Supreme Court confirmations typically take about 2 months from nomination to confirmation, and the McConnell-led Republicans are eager to seat Kavanaugh on the court by the time its next session begins October 1. In August, Kavanaugh will head to the Senate Judiciary Committee for hearings, the first step in the confirmation process. Democrats on the committee can gum up the works in several ways, according to Sarah Binder, a senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution and professor of political science at George Washington University, where she specializes in Congress and legislative politics. That's the first real venue where minority party members have opportunity to make themselves difficult, Binder said. For instance, the committee's ultimate job is to issue a recommendation report on Kavanaugh to the rest of the Senate. But to conduct hearings or vote on such a report, a quorum must be present, and a quorum for the purpose of transacting business consists of 9 members of the committee, including at least 2 members of the minority, according to the committee's rules of procedure. If 8 of the Democrats on the committee refuse to show up, its business could conceivably grind to a halt, at least until Republicans figure out how to suspend the rules. Similarly, another Judiciary Committee rule states that a single member can object to bringing a matter to a vote without further debate, and that this objection can be upheld if all minority party members vote in its favor. In theory, Binder said, this means that each of the 10 Democrats on the committee could, in turn, register an objection to voting on Kavanaugh's recommendation report, round-robin style, and that each successive objection could delay the vote for up to a week. At some point, however, Binder believes that fed-up Republicans would put in motion a discharge petition, which would bypass the Judiciary Committee and simply bring Kavanaugh's nomination to the full Senate for consideration. Ultimately, it's really hard to see minority committee members blocking a vote and delaying forever, Binder said. Republicans are very good at playing hardball. Democrats are less good at it. Once Kavanaugh is out of committee, Democrats' options for postponing a vote will diminish. Some have discussed the possibility of the 49 Democrats breaking quorum in the Senate as a whole by refusing to come to the chamber or vote on anything, thereby making it difficult for Republicans alone to muster the 51 senators necessary to conduct business. Unfortunately for Democrats, there are classic responses to quorum breaking that enable a determined majority to overcome the tactic, according to University of Miami political scientist Gregory Koger, a specialist in filibustering and legislative obstructionism. In short, any delay from quorum breaking wouldn't last long. At the same time, there's a bigger problem to consider: the more extreme the procedural maneuver, the more political risk it entails. Manchin, Heitkamp, and Donnelly and the other 7 Democratic incumbents up for re-election in states Trump won might agree to stick with their fellow Dems and vote against Kavanaugh, reasoning that they'd rather lose a few Trump voters back home in November than discourage the Democratic base. But they're much less likely to support, say, shutting down the entire government over his nomination. the ideal situation for Kavanaugh's opponents would involve the activism of ordinary Americans to merge with whatever parliamentary tactics Democrats hope to use to either stall or kill the nomination. As such, the rally outside the Supreme Court on Monday night suggested that passions and convictions were at a high point. At the same time, Republicans are clearly confident about their own prospects. "We are in this fight together," said Richard Blumenthal, Democrat of Connecticut, implying that the oft-warring factions of the liberal establishment are ready to unite in trying to stop Kavanaugh's ascension to the Supreme Court. Andrew Romano and Lania Yost contributed reporting. More NewsPulse news stories on the Supreme Court.